If I asked you, do musical instruments always have all of the musical notes? Your first instinctive reaction might be, well, yeah, of course, obviously. But in fact, it ain't necessarily so. Some familiar examples that don't have all of the notes are bagpipes, harmonicas, and those cute little Fisher-Price xylophones with the colorful metal bars that you used to play when you were a toddler. And I raise this issue because it's very intimately related to playing the fretted dulcimer. If you go into a music store and they have a fretted dulcimer for sale, chances are it'll have a fretboard that looks a lot like this. This fretboard sounds like this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, flat, ti, do. And it's like this for reasons that are historical, but that actually aren't very relevant for the repertoire that I usually play. So when I first took up the dulcimer on an instrument that had several teeth missing, I asked myself, what should I do if a song needs a note that I don't have? And it turns out there are several options. First thing is try playing the song in another key, and sometimes that'll work. A great example is the 60s hit Wild Thing. Now, I'm tuned D-A-D, so the logical key to play it in is D. And coming out of the verse, going into the bridge, the chords are D, D, G, G, A, C, D, C, D. So let's see how that works. And then I don't have a C chord down here. But if I play it in E instead, I've got all the chords I need. Here's another example, and I actually saw somebody do this in an important performance. Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. Now, the obvious key, so to speak, for this song is E minor. And whoops, he needed a half step on top of that riff, not a whole step. If you play it in F sharp minor instead, the riff works, and so does the whole rest of the song. But what if changing keys doesn't solve it for a particular song? What other choices do you have? Well, you could add a string, and actually there are quite a few outstanding four-string dulcimer players. But for me, 4 strings is simply too many. A 4-finger chord to me makes me feel like I'm playing Twister with both hands and both feet glued to the mat. Another option, though, would be to change the tuning. Well, I use a lot of chords when I play, and using a second tuning means I would have to learn a whole second set of chords. I prefer to stick with one tuning where I know hundreds of chords and just know that tuning inside out, and it would just be too much overhead for me to have to learn a second tuning like that. Another possibility would be to add a fret that gives me the note that I'm missing. It's still a 3-string dulcimer, it's still the same tuning, so yes, all of my existing knowledge still applies. This is a great solution. And a great example of this is the song You and Me on the Rock by Brandi Carlile, which is actually on my album and which actually was written on a dulcimer. The beginning of the bridge, the first chord in the bridge is an F major, and the melody note is F natural. And this dulcimer here doesn't even have an F natural anyplace on the fretboard. So if I get a dulcimer that has a fret here in between the first and second frets, then this is an F natural here. And then coming out of the chorus, it's I don't need them money, baby, just you and me on the rock. It's an earthquake. And there's my F chord. And so the song works. I want to take this concept a step further and talk about the old song Tequila from the 1950s. If I play that in A, there's a tricky part in the bridge that works perfectly well. However, if I wanted to play it in G, which is a key I sometimes want to play it in, I don't have a B flat on this instrument anyplace. The solution is to get out a dulcimer that has even more frets. This particular dulcimer has a fully chromatic fretboard, sort of like a guitar fretboard. And so now, if I want to play in G, it works. The upshot is that I find myself almost always playing dulcimers that have a few non-traditional frets, and that's because I want to play a lot of contemporary music or whatever other kinds of music I want to, and if I'm playing with other musicians, I want to be able to play along in their keys and not be restricted to the one key that'll work or the two keys that'll work on a dulcimer. So I'm usually either playing a fully chromatic dulcimer like this, or what I like to call a semi-chromatic dulcimer that has no big gaps at the beginning of the fretboard. And then these other guys I only use pretty much when I'm teaching. So does it seem a little weird that dulcimers are so non-standardized? I mean, you go to a guitar store, you buy a guitar, it's got 6 strings and you're done, right? Well, except that you've seen 12-string guitars, but that's 6 pairs of strings. But then again, I've also seen some heavy metal guitar players who have like 7 or 8-string guitars. And then there's cigar box guitars, I think they're usually 3 strings. And then tenor guitars have 4 strings. And there was that classical guitarist, Narciso Yepes, who he was famous for playing a 10-string guitar. So I guess maybe guitars aren't so standardized either, and dulcimers aren't as weird as we thought. But anyhow, when it comes to the dulcimer, the bottom line is I want to be able to play the songs that I choose, and I don't want my instrument to be the limiting factor. And that means I want to have a dulcimer that gives me as many playing options as possible. We're going to talk about playing in some future videos, but for now, just keep your eyes peeled and stay tuned.